Fellow actors of Western New York, welcome to Small Talk with Tony, an interview series where we get together with actors, production crew, and people in the biz to make small talk. I'm your host, the owner, chief storyteller, and the Tony behind Tony Video. Now, over the course of this series, we will sit down one-on-one with very talented people and learn of their experiences, which may help you along your journey. So, let's make some small talk.
Actions always find a way to shine brighter than the things you say.
So today's guest is the wonderful Dudney Joseph Jr., an actor who's originally from Western New York. Now, Dudney has acted on stage, and he's also appeared in several TV shows. I've had the pleasure to work with Dudney back in 2018 in Second Generation Theater's production of Angels in America Part 1. So can everyone please join me in welcoming a very special person. Dudney, thank you so much for being here to take some time for some small talk.
Hello, everyone. Dudney Joseph Jr. So glad to be here. Can't wait to get into it.
Dudney, it's great to have you here. So for people that don't know your journey, tell us a little bit about yourself, from living in Buffalo to where you are now.
I'm 35 years old, born and raised in Buffalo, New York. I went to West Seneca East Middle and High School. And then in 2007, I graduated from high school and went to Providence, Rhode Island to Johnson Wales University to study marketing communications. Why I did that, I don't know, but ran over there for a year. And the funny thing about that is the drama club at that university, they were working on Little Shop of Horrors. So they had an audition notice go out, audition, got the role of the plant. And as soon as I finished that production, I was like, what are you doing? You're in the wrong place. So I left Rhode Island, went to SUNY Potsdam, auditioned for their music program, got in to Crane for music education and concentration in voice. But I didn't do too well. I had a really tough time, like juggling both academia and music school. I should have pursued maybe like a conservatory, but didn't know too much about it at the time. So I left, came back to Buffalo, got a job at Geico selling property insurance, where I met Kristen Bentley. And then the rest was history. She put me onto the Buffalo theater scene. And from then on, I just started working, auditioned for O'Connell and Company. We worked together, did Angels with Second Generation Theater, did tons of stuff at, Cavanoki Musical Fair, Irish Classical. And did that for about, a very long time until we got to like 2019, and I was ready to move. I was ready to move to the city. So I moved in February of 2020, moved to Harlem, New York. And then now what I do is just reside here in Harlem. Just recently closed my first off-Broadway show at the Public Theater, which was a wild ride. And then other than that, I've been working on TV too. So you can see me on tons of shows, Harlem on Amazon Prime, Wu-Tang on Hulu, The Crowded Room on Apple TV, and then most recently I'll be on Run the World on Stars.
Well, it sounds like you've been pretty busy over there.
Yep. Grateful.
Well, it's interesting talking about your experiences, because you started in one field of study but ended up somewhere different. And I think people can get easily discouraged when they don't line things up or get it right the first time. And ultimately they're afraid to make mistakes or even try new things. So when you finally found your path, it seemed like you started in musicals and slowly transitioned into plays. Did you have a preference in doing musicals or plays, or were you open to new experiences?
Well, I'm still doing musicals. I think that for me, it still has been musicals because, like, The Harder They Come is definitely a musical. There's more music in it than there is scene content. But I think the change, or the thing that branched off for me, is the TV film thing. So I started with, musicals, heavy. And then what kind of branched out or kind of opened the door to TV and film was the pandemic. So when I moved here, I had a lot of gigs lined up and lost all of them, just like everyone else, due to the pandemic. But the film industry and TV industry was still thriving. Like, they had found a way to work under those conditions. So my agents, we switched gears. So they just started submitting me for like co-star and guest star roles on TVs. And I worked with a coach. And then I just was like, oh, okay. Like, yeah, let's just hop over to this side while, theater is taking a break. So that's kind of how that happened.
Okay, so we got an idea about your introduction into acting, but talk a little bit more about why you chose to pursue acting and the performing arts.
Okay. So I have to shout out, there's four people that super influential in my life. So the first is Miss Shirley Torch, who was my middle school music teacher. There was also Philip Ferrugia, we all know Phil,
Yep.
who, believe it or not, was my high school music teacher. Catherine Chesley, who was my high school theater teacher, and Lorna C. Hill, may she rest in peace, who was the founder of Ujima Theater Company. So I think what started, though, what really kind of just, where I got bit by the bug, if you will, was Miss Shirley Torch in middle school had us sign up for this 3-day intensive at Buff State College, which was performed by this troupe called the Young Americans. And I will never, I still to this day get chills over that experience. I vividly remember me sitting in the theater and looking around and be like, wait, this is it. I found my thing, I found my people, But the cool thing was this troupe was, it's crazy. I don't know if they do it anymore. But you would go and apply out of high school, and it's a collegiate program, kind of like a conservatory, and they train them to, be triple threats. And along with that training, they tour and they go to different cities and bring in, every level from elementary, middle, and high school, and they teach these kids everything about the arts and build a variety show. So on the first day, you kind of learn scene study, improv, choreo, dancing, singing, all of the above. Your second day, you audition for little solos and pop out things and dance features. And then the third day, when we put everything together, before everything is all said and done, they presented us with a performance. And at that moment, I was like, this is what I want to do. It was incredible. It was watching all of these performers do every show under the sun, from it was Bringing in the Noise, Bringing in the Funk, Pippin, Joseph Technicolor Dreamcoat, Cinderella, Singing in the Rain. They just put a mosh of all these things, and seeing them just run circles around this thing, I was just so entertained. And it was a gift. We didn't know they were going to do that for us. So that's how the show started for our families. And then we took an intermission, and then it was our turn to get on stage and do it with them. And I will never, from that moment, I remember, I think I asked some of the performers, how do I do this? And I remember getting a pamphlet and being so excited and going to my parents and be like, I'm going to be a Young American. They were like, absolutely not.
Well, yeah, that sounds like most people. I mean, you can't deny, what your heart tells you, but there's a balance to it. It's like your heart will guide you in the right direction, and your brain will keep you in the right direction. That way you can always stay balanced and not find yourself in a difficult position. So you found something that you gravitate towards. Talk to us about the initial challenges you faced while in Buffalo, and then ultimately when you moved into the city.
Yeah. My original plan. Years later, my original plan was to move to New York. I just really wanted to go for it. I didn't want to have any regrets. And at that time, I will say this was a crazy, serendipitous thing where I was on a flight with Norm Lewis, who is one of my acting idols. And I had asked for 5 minutes of his time, because when we were deboarding the plane in Buffalo, it was so strange. I took the last flight. I was visiting New York for an audition. I took the last flight out from New York going back to Buffalo. He happened to be on it, small jet, right? And he waited for me. Once we got off, I was at the last row in the back of the plane. He was obviously in the first row. But when I walked past him, I was like, hey, Mr. Lewis, I just admire you so much. Do you have a minute just to, can I have a minute of your time? And yeah, he waited for me, and we walked from getting off the plane to baggage claim. And at that moment, he I remember him telling me, like, I moved to the city like in my 30s, so it's not too late. Like, if you're asking me now at 30, whether, how was it moving or starting this career, like, you still want to do it. You still are being drawn to it, so go for it. So anyway, so that's kind of what sparked it. I made a plan, moved to New York City, was going to hit the ground running. I'd already been doing open calls as a non-equity actor, and so I was just going to do that. And then I think the other thing that I kind of, where I was kind of leaning in the right direction, was I built a map of all of the agencies and artist management companies in New York City. And I planned, once I had gotten there, would seek an interview with all of them, as many as I could. I had done my research, looked at reviews, and just found out the ones that were really prominent. And I was like, I don't know how I'm going to get in front of their face, but I'm going to figure it out. That's the plan. But then it was interesting, through those auditions that I had been doing, months leading up to my move, I have been working with this company called The Growing Studio, which I have to plug. I think that it's an amazing resource for new actors in the city. It is pay to play, take that however you want, but I think it's worth it. What they had at the time was a artist residence series where you would go in for like a few weeks. And for example, say the artist residence series is Hamilton, and you know that you're a good fit for Hamilton. So you would go in, you would pay to have this 4-week intensive with this company. And what they would do is 3 weeks out of the 4, you would work with the music director on Broadway of that show. And then the 4th week, you would work with the resident director on Broadway of that show. And you would present both your, 16 32-bar cut and also the material that you would perform in the show. So you are directly in front of the person who calls the shots. So I had done that, had a lot of success with that. And they sent out an email blast right as I was gearing up to like say, okay, I'm going to go to New York. I'm going to do this thing. And they had a showcase, a New York showcase. Now their showcases, same kind of formula, 5-week run, 4 hours a week. And on the final performance of your showcase, you're performing for 14 agencies at one time. So I jumped. But the challenge was I was currently in First Date at Musical Fair, which runs 6 days a week.
Right.
So I did the show Wednesday to Sunday, and then Monday night, I took an overnight bus at like 11 from Buffalo to New York City. I got in New York City at 6 a.m. And thankfully at the time, my job had an office in New York. So I worked in the office at like 8 to 5. And then I went to showcase rehearsal from 5 to 9 on Monday. And then Monday at midnight, took the train back to get to Buffalo. Excuse me. Yeah. Tuesday, that's at midnight. Tuesday at midnight, took the train to get back to Buffalo and then did the show for the week. I did that for 5 weeks straight. So that was my first challenge where I think halfway through, I was like, what are you doing? Because I'm functioning on fumes, just, everything. I feel like I'm feeling at everything, but I'm glad I did it. I'm glad I stuck through it, because from that, I was able to get representation, and then that sealed the deal on my move, where like when I'd signed, they were like, you need to move. So that was the first thing. Then the second thing is when I had gotten here, like Buffalo, like cost of living, I'm sure it's going up now, but you can make it work. Oh, I got hit real hard when I came here. I mean, I thankfully had saved, but even with saving, it just nothing made sense. I just, I was, where I was living, I was so fortunate to live with like Linda and Mike Fermato as their tenant, and so I had a 3-bedroom, apartment. And then I was coming here to get look for a 1-bedroom apartment, and it was 4 times what I would pay there. And not to mention, at that time, you needed first month, second, last month, and security and agent fee. So you were just shelling out so much money. It just didn't make sense. So I humbled myself real quick, and I stayed on my aunt's couch for a few months. I lived out of a suitcase. And that was that. I hung out there until I was able to get a sublet, and through a few connections. And then once I got a sublet, I had enough time and to get my stuff together to get my own place, which I have now, which is great. But that moving here and trying to get settled, that was really challenging. And I think the worst part of all of that during that time, I moved February 2020, so the pandemic hit. So I was also dealing with all of that. Not me catching COVID as well, which I had it pretty badly. I had it in March, so I had it before they knew what it was. So there were no tests or anything, and my lungs were filling up, and they didn't know what was going on. So that too, I just was like, is this a sign for me to go back home? Like, should I not be here? But I think I mentioned her before, but Kristen's like one of my soldiers. My ride or die, I call her. She was like, no, like hang in there. Like, this is a really rough bump, but like imagine what it's gonna feel like if you get over it. And I'm glad I listened to her and just stuck it out. I'm glad that God spared my life. And so then here I am 3 years later.
Well, you made it.
Oh, and yeah, now I'm not going anywhere. If I could get through all of that, they're gonna have to drag me out of here by my teeth.
By the way, I didn't realize you went through all of that, during that time. Because I saw First Date. It was a great show. Everybody did a great job, great performance. But I also saw First Date off Broadway when it first came out. It was my first show in the city. I had a chance to meet Zachary Levi. He was such a cool guy. But to see that show and then see you guys do it, and now knowing you went through hell during that time, I just want you to know that I appreciate it.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you.
Your misery provides us pleasure, so thank you. All right, so you've been in the city for some time now. It seems like you've been pretty busy, and I've been keeping an eye on some of the things you've been a part of, but tell us something that you've been working on recently or something that you're particularly proud of since your move to the city.
Yeah, it's funny. I think the show that we just closed, The Harder They Come at the Public, I think is something that I'm most proud of. And because I was fortunate enough to be a part of the last workshop for that production. So in the September, in the fall of last year is when we kind of worked on just building the show, building characters. Like I know, like my character, I played Detective Ray. He had like, I don't know, one scene, to the point where now in the show, I'm like closing act 2, or act 1 rather. And so it was really cool to be a part of a process where you're in the room with the writers and you're in the room with these accredited and declarated, creatives, and they're like, like listening to what you have to say and like seeing what you can do and developing and elaborating, and you're seeing all of these characters come to life. So it was really cool to see like the fruits of our labor and get our roses when we won the Outer Critics Circle Award for Outstanding New Off-Broadway Musical. So that's the biggest thing. Thank you. That's like the biggest thing, because it's hard. Like when you're in it, I will say I've never worked harder, like physically, mentally, emotionally. Like this process is when you're building a new musical, insane. I mean, things change every day, and you need to, and they don't care. Like the fact that you got your material, the morning of or the night before, like you need to be on book, figure it out. So it was just curveballs, constant curveballs, and just having to manage expectations and manage your ego and manage all of these, your dark, insecurities and stuff like that. So to kind of get that award, and I will say too that the critics, not all of them enjoyed the show. So once our reviews came out and we opened that, it kind of was, some of it wasn't terrible, but it just wasn't as gleaming as I'd hoped. And so it left me with a feeling like, oh man, like we did all this work, we shed all of this for what? And then to get that award at the end, it was just the cherry on top, along with the audience reaction. Like that feeling is something that it just reminded me of like why I came out here and why I'm doing what I'm doing and why I'm trying to stay in the game,
Well, it's interesting because, you work very hard on something, you spend all this time, and you're worrying about what, the critics might say, what other people may say, but they don't see what you do every day. I mean, it sounds like, what you're saying is to present yourself in the best way possible and not worry about what critics say, what other people say, and don't worry about the things that are out of your control. Because as long as you're happy with what you've done, that's essentially the main point.
Absolutely. I see that, and to tag along to that too, I think if you keep that mentality, it'll make for the best experience, because if you start to lean into the other stuff and all of the negative thoughts, it'll ruin the whole thing. It'll taint the whole thing. So even if you never get that like award at the end or whatever, if you're able to be pleased with all the work you've invested in stuff like that, if you're able to find the silver lining throughout the whole thing, you'll still come out whole, and fulfilled. So,
Well, this is all great stuff, and I'm pretty sure there's plenty more to come. But my last question for you is that I'm sure there's a lot of aspiring actors and others in this industry that would like to know. But what is something that you would recommend to those that are looking to follow a similar path? I mean, you've talked about getting advice from somebody that you admire. What would you like to pass on to others?
two things. The first thing I'd say, catchphrase I'd use would be have a brand and a plan. And the brand thing is really, really important. I'd say after I did the showcase, and I'd gotten feedback from the agencies that were present, there was this cool miscellaneous line on this form that we had gotten after we had performed. It was kind of crazy. After you did your last performance, you got a stack of 14 papers from all the agents in New York, basically telling you what they thought of you. Everything from, I think one of my classmates had gotten feedback saying one of the agents mentioned that they hated her eyebrows. It's New York. They don't hold back here. Not sure why that was important.
You don't have to shave your eyebrows, everybody.
Right. But on that miscellaneous thing, I had gotten a lot of feedback in regards to my type. And it was very interesting because a lot of them were saying, you favor or resemble Oak, who played Hercules Mulligan in Hamilton, meets Joshua Henry. And for me, it was really cool. Also an honor to be, be mentioned in the name, in the circle of those two names. But what it told me was, okay, look at those two careers and figure out where I fit. And so that kind of goes to the brand. And the reason why that was so important was because once I had my agent meetings and we were trying to figure out who I was going to sign with, almost all of them, not only did they ask me, what's my type, they also asked, what show am I good for now? Like, what can I submit you for right now, today? And you don't know that unless you know your type and you know what you can offer and you know your strengths. So I think the meetings wouldn't have gone as favorable had I not known who I was as a performer. The other thing, it just saves a lot of time, because when you come out here, there are so many things to audition for, so many things to kind of throw your hat in the ring for, but you don't want to waste your time because you'll burn out very quickly. So you have to understand like what market you fit in, what are my strengths, how do I fit in this story. So that's kind of where that brand comes about. And I do say the little asterisk to that though is like, if you're working with an agent, they do all of that legwork for you. So if you do end up getting a call, I'd say jump, even if it doesn't sound or feel like your type or your brand. You still want to do that because you never know what's being discussed on the other side of the table, where casting may know that there may be another version of this character out there somewhere that the producer or director may want, and you don't want to lose out a chance in being seen. So that's the only little side to it. But the brand thing is huge. Along with that comes the physical materials and the actual package that you present. For every meeting, before I even got a time slot confirmed for some of these agencies, they requested materials. So that was demo reel, performance links of me singing, website, headshots and resumes, all of these things. And so you really need to make sure you have your full package assembled before you get here. Because if you were to come, I imagine if I were to say, hey, I don't have that yet, or let me try to put something together, that ship to sell. They'll most likely say, hey, we'll pass for now. And then once you get your stuff together, we'll revisit this. And who knows how long that would be, a year, 2 years, So I really think that's like a huge, huge thing. And then the other thing that I have, and then the plan was, like, how do you want to attack it, right? Like, what avenue do you want to pursue? Do you want to go strictly into TV and film? Do you want to go to voiceover work? Do you want to go into musical theater or straight plays? And then even with that, what do you want to do? Regional work? Do you want to do national touring, Broadway, cruise line? There are so, it's just, I think that's the main thing, is like just being very intentional about where you want to go. And if you kind of divert off that plan, that's fine. You can adjust. That's what we do. But you got to have some sort of outline built before you get here. And then the last thing is a tribe. I'm really huge on that. Like, you have to find a tribe here. Find your people, find people that get you, that understand you, find relationships where it's easy and it's not work, and you don't have to feel like you're on when you're surrounded by these people. Because I will say I've had some pretty bad losses that have kind of like grounded me for a little bit, and had I not had a sense of community or have somebody to latch on to, I don't know what the outcome would have been. And then on the flip side, I've had like small wins. Like, I remember, I have to shout out my best friend, Michael Worldly, because I remember my first co-star role that I had booked. I was like, oh, it's a co-star. I have like 2 lines. Who cares? I was really excited about it, but I was looking ahead. I was like, I need the guest star. I need the role, like, especially in TV. Like, at that time, I had no theater credits here in New York. And so I was really like hard on myself about it. And then he was like, no, Dudney, like, big win, small win, we're celebrating. I'll never forget, after my first day of shooting, the pandemic had just kind of closed. Things were starting to reopen. And he got a reservation for this restaurant called Rock, which is a cool, swanky restaurant here. And they make like crazy cool cocktails with flames coming out of them. And it's like a Japanese fusion type ramen place. But they're known for their awesome cocktails. And the 2 of us, we sat outside because we couldn't eat indoors yet, in like pretty chilly weather, with flaming cocktails, and celebrated. And I will, always appreciate stuff like that, because it helps you keep going. You know what I mean? Because you can be so stuck in the grind and trying to get to this top of the mountain. But you have to celebrate everything from the bottom to the top in between. And then, like Andre says, then you keep going, because the top is just the bottom of the next mountain. So you just have to keep on going. But it's harder to do that if you're so focused on the huge, big, major things. So yeah, find your people, find a sense of community here that can just lift you up, and do things that are not always centered around theater. I think that's the other thing. If this becomes your everything in your life and you eat, sleep, breathe this, you will burn out as well. You have to find something else that drives you. You have to find something else to keep you going in the background, so that when this gets a little tough and a little tiring and taxing, that you can fall back on that to recharge and then go at it again.
Well, thank you, Dudney, for taking the time for some small talk. It's always a pleasure speaking with you, and we really appreciate your time and your insight. So thanks again.
Pleasure to see you too, brother. Thank you.
So what's the best way for people to learn more about you and to follow your journey?
Dudney Jr. on Instagram. Super active on Instagram. So you can just hit me up on there, ask any questions, follow me. I also have a website, DudneyJoseph.com. So you can follow my website for updates on new projects, anything I'm working on.
Excellent. Well, this concludes Small Talk with Tony. I want to thank you guys for joining us today. I want to thank my host. Thank you very much, Dudney. It's always a pleasure. So make sure you guys like Tony Video on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and visit tonyvideo.com, where you can book audition taping services, set up your actor reel, and get the latest news.
Actions always find a way to shine brighter than